Hello, this is Matt Singer. I'm the arts and culture editor at Willamette Week, and my guest today is Shannon Wheeler. Shannon is an illustrator. You may have seen his work in everything from the New Yorker to Mad Magazine. He's worked for Dark Horse Comics. Probably his most famous creation is the comic strip Too Much Coffee Man. But Shannon, we're here today to talk about another little piece of work that you did that's very of the moment. But before we get to that, let me just ask. So now that we've entered sort of pandemic Mach 2, where's your head at? And how are you holding up?
Oh, it got a little crazy. It's odd watching movies like The Birds, 28 Days Later, Contagion. Just I miss going to the gym, and I hate the gym, but you know, it's taking long walks. That's the trick.
Mm. So speaking of the pandemic, you just recently did this comic strip kind of for kids, comic book about COVID. Can you tell me just a little bit about what it is and kind of how you got involved with this?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Mike Rosen, who organized a trip a while back to go to New Orleans after Katrina and talk about the oil spill and the storm and all that. And I did a book on that with Steve Dean. And then the COVID book, it was Mike who said, "Hey, do you want to do an education comic for kids with Down syndrome?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds, yeah." It was a great project, and um, watched movies about Down syndrome kids, talked to some on Skype, and just sort of worked out like, oh, what it was nice to move away from the political stuff. I just did the Mueller report as a graphic novel, and to move out of the Trump milieu and into something like COVID. It oddly was a lot more lighthearted and a lot more fun. I mean, the approach that I tried to do on it was to not have a villain, not have it be a superhero book, but to really move into the kind of trying to say, hey, this is a scary time, it's a difficult time, but we make the best of it, and we try to treat each other well and have fun in the range of opportunities that we have.
And it's the book is funded by the Oregon Health Authority. Did you have a lot of freedom in terms of like how you could present the information that they wanted to present in this?
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, they want it to be inclusive. They want it to be friendly. It's they want it to be not rated R or PG-13, which all that everything that they were wanting is stuff that politically and socially I'm already in line with. So yeah, I had really complete freedom with it. And then the people that I worked with also were very much they threw in ideas like, hey, instead of making the wheelchair what I was thinking of as a wheelchair, make it a sports wheelchair. So it's more self-propelled, and it's more about so the suggestions really improved. There were things that were just blind spots for me that really improved it. But it was great. Yeah, it was a real privilege to be able to work on this. It felt good.
Yeah, because you're mostly in terms of the stuff that you illustrate, it's mostly for adults, obviously. I mean, how long has it been since you've done something that's like specifically aimed at kids?
Ah, I did some work for Cricket Magazine a while back, and when was that? Maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But really, to me it feels the same. Like when I was growing up reading Mad Magazine, um, the things that I felt about it were it never was condescending. And same with like when I did the thing for Cricket Magazine, um, it was the same thing of like write something for kids, but don't make it condescending. So basically, I'm writing for adults and then just being careful not to be blue.
Um, so yeah, the idea, I guess, is basically like trying to put COVID and how to be safe in a context that would, engage a younger person and make them kind of understand it. And like you said, you have a 7-year-old as your
Yeah.
youngest.
Yeah.
How have you personally explained what's been going on uh, in terms of the pandemic? How have you been able to like contextualize that for them?
Reality for kids is very much what we give them. So everything is normal. They don't have a baseline to say, this is reality, and now here's this new thing that we have to adjust to. It's just like, today we're not going to OMSI because it's completely overrun with disease. And they're like, oh, okay, whatever, like it's all just whatever that day is. Their children, as a rule, are very much living in the moment, which is something that, as adults we can learn from and try to live more in the moment ourselves.
Mhm. It was interesting that you mentioned, you obviously you talked about how you spent a while illustrating the Mueller report with Steve Dean, who I spoke to for the series as well. So you were sort of living in Trump world, and then but this is actually a break. Talking about an infectious disease is actually a break from you for talking about Trump.
Absolute relief, yeah, because all of a sudden we're combating an inanimate object. It's this thing that nobody can help, and it's not. It's a difficult thing, but you know, man's inhumanity to man is abhorrent. There's something that is soul crushing about the cruelty and exploitation of one human being and what they do to another. So to have something that's like, hey, here's this disease, it's fundamentally mechanical. You know, do these basic things and we will work to mitigate the effect of it. And it's just, it, it's like grade school math, like wear a mask, socially, like here's these things that we figured out, do these simple things, and that will help a lot. And that's amazing. When you're dealing with the cruelty of man, it's like, here's a horrible person who is it just brings you down. It's like, oh man, like this is not what we were put on the earth to be, like these inhuman people. I don't like putting kids in cages and defunding education, just these nasty, horrible things that yeah, it's depressing. So yeah, the COVID's a relief.
But on the one hand, obviously you can't. There's a lot of elements of that of man's inhumanity to man in this outbreak, and you're, as you said, these are very simple fundamental things that are actually probably easy to explain to children, and then I think
Yeah.
children can absorb. But it's the problem is that adults seem to be having the problem uh, taking these lessons to heart. What are we beyond like convincing the people who do not want to take this pandemic seriously to take it seriously? Do you feel like there's anything that you could do in your capacity as a creator to convince a 30-year-old in Missouri or whatever not to travel on Thanksgiving or on Christmas at this point? Like what can you do for the adults in this situation?
That's where I definitely want to move into more adult humor to convince those people. So there's a cartoon that I'm doing where somebody's not wanting to wear a mask, and then me wearing a mask pulls it down and sneezes all over them, and then puts the mask back up and says, why on earth wouldn't you want to wear a mask? And so that's not a kid's joke, because kids then they tend to emulate. And also with kids, they have this notion that if it's funny once, it's funny always. um, I'll move into adult humor for a face diaper, calling somebody who's not wearing that. You call them out in the store by saying, "Oh, your face penis is showing," and then they get embarrassed. And yeah, we'll have to move into some adult humor, I think.